This program and its contents are designed for information and educational purposes only. This program does not render medical advice or professional services and is not intended to be a substitute for professional care. The information provided here should not be used for the purposes of diagnosing or treating a medical or psychiatric condition. If you have or suspect you may have a health problem, consult your healthcare provider.
Hi, welcome to Positive Momentum TV. I'm Diane Silva, and today my guest is Katie Jensen with Peace Army. We're here in Katie's office. Beautiful. I love the pictures and love the coloring. Anyway, one of the things we're going to be continuing talking about is wellness. We've laid the foundation last show for the power and control, and then we're going to discuss wellness and weight loss and preparations. And I'm going to let Katie take it since I'm a little tongue-tied.
So yeah, we were talking about how power and control becomes woven into the way we approach problems. If we've grown up in a culture where parents yell or say mean things to you or isolate you in some ways or minimize, deny, and blame or any of those things on the power wheel, and that we internalize those behaviors and then speak that way, treat ourselves in that same way. So I get overweight, I can't be around other people.
Oh, definitely.
Isolation, right? So now I don't deserve to go swimming. I'm not going to be on the beach. I'm not going to join them for the hike. And it becomes your own form of isolation. Minimize, deny, and blame. It's not that big a deal. I'm not that overweight. It's fine. It doesn't bother me that much. And, I deserve it for the way I eat. Just talking to yourself in a way where you've internalized this sort of negative-based idea that if you create fear, if you create shame, that people will change. And that isn't really what works. Too much shame, too much fear actually paralyzes people. Shame makes you want to hide. And interestingly enough, if you think about what denial is, and I believe that what denial is an overabundance of shame and guilt that causes the brain to literally hide the truth from itself.
Oh, very interesting.
Creating denial.
That's quite interesting when you think about it.
And so the idea of acceptance and change is learning to regulate the fear and the shame, accepting that those emotions are there and exist, and doing something with it that will be effective. And so this whole philosophy is a real paradigm shift from power and control to what I like to think of as more of a truth and peace-based way of interacting with change instead of a fear-based way.
Can we go back a minute to I had a real strong emotional response to your description of denial. And I can see from me, just my response, it's like, this could be why it was so hard to accept and so hard to turn around, because I've stuffed and denied, and now I have to face and accept. Can we speak to that just a little bit?
I think that's the hardest part of any change, really. When you're working with people, you can see it, but it's harder to see in ourselves. But when I was on my own journey with this, and I started the mindfulness piece, just paying attention to my relationship with food, really it was about mapping what is. I heard my voice. I heard the way I talked to myself about my weight. I heard my denial, wanting to say, like, I caught myself on some days, I'd eaten, and then it'd be later in the day, and I'd eat again, and I'd say, well, I haven't eaten anything all day. But I had. All of a sudden, I'd be in the middle of eating something, and I'd realize, oh my gosh, you had a huge meal at lunch. Why did you tell yourself you haven't eaten all day? But I think I felt guilt and shame about eating a second meal or wanting more food or something. And then I would just even deny the truth of it. So I started to see the ways I wasn't being honest with myself. And I started to see how much shame and guilt there was in that. And as I used my DBT skills of emotion regulation, which meant accepting the emotion, and then deciding what I wanted to do about it, what would be an effective way to interact with it, and making choices about it, I started to realize that I really started to realize I wasn't being nice to myself, that my relationship with food was self-destructive and mean to me. And the shaming that I would do, all of it fit into this pattern of behavior where I was replaying that power and control stuff in my own interactions with myself and with food. So food, I started to realize, was like self-harm or like drinking too much. I could really see for the first time, but it only came by my really working on accepting myself the way I was. I did the silly assignments about standing naked in the mirror and and not saying judgmental things and being willing to just accept what is. And I was surprised, and I say this all the time when I'm teaching DBT, that the truth is actually gentle. But it didn't feel like it, because I think if you're raised in power and control, you start to think that the truth is mean.
Yeah, it does feel mean, but there's also this fear component of feeling those emotions.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the fear of feeling shame, or the fear of feeling guilt.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I kind of went backwards just a little bit. I'm kind of stuck on that fear of...
been raised in power and control, then guilt and shame come with emotional pain and maybe even physical pain. Right. And so feeling those feelings actually can become reactive. I'm not going to feel it. I can't push feel it. I won't feel it. It isn't there. And that contributes to denial. And then that makes the process of change almost impossible if you are unable to process guilt and shame in an effective way. And so for those of us raised with that power and control, and that's most of us in this culture, because that was the prevailing way of parenting. So this isn't about shaming people for the way they raise their kids. It's really about facing what works and what doesn't.
So how would you suggest, maybe a different way of saying this, is those of us, I'm going to speak for me. I will start to feel something, and I haven't allowed myself to feel it yet. It's like, I know once I start feeling this, I will start getting to where I want to go. My journey, your journey, what would be the best, what's the word we want to use? Best practice. To be able to get yourself to that point where you can begin to...
We really need to focus on that emotion regulation piece. I mean, we just don't teach that. We're not really role modeling that. As parents, I think about the words I used with my kids at times and the things said to me, you're okay, you're fine. There's just not a lot of teaching of emotion regulation or accepting that emotions have a purpose. Every emotion is an electrical jolt through your body that makes you want to do something.
Okay.
And every emotion has an action urge with it that it makes you want to do. Fear makes you want to back away or run. Mm-hmm. Anger makes you want to attack. Joy makes you want to connect with people. Sadness makes you want to withdraw and give yourself time to heal. Mm-hmm. Trying to think of some of the other ones. Disgust makes you turn away. Interest makes you want to move towards something. And that's huge. You think about going to the moon and exploring the oceans and the amount of fear we have to override. And so you see, that's when you can kind of see that interest is such a powerful emotion. Okay. That's what makes us climb a mountain and risk our lives to know something. But it's an emotion. So each of the emotions have an action urge with them, and it's learning those action urges, and it's learning how to practice a non-judgmental stance so you can kind of figure out, is this emotion being created by the thought I'm thinking, or is the emotion being created by the true, valid circumstances I'm in? For instance, is there really danger here? Do I need to run? Or am I telling myself it's dangerous when it's not? For instance, if I'm working with somebody who wants to go to school to finish a degree, but they had a bad experience in high school where they flunked out and had to get a GED, they're afraid to go to school because they're afraid they'll find out they're a failure.
Okay.
And so they'll say, I can't go. Well, if we're using DBT, then we would accept you feel afraid. And I wouldn't shame that person for being afraid. I would say, let's accept that fear. So you're feeling afraid. Now, is it valid? Are you in imminent danger if you go to school? And if they can see that it feels like it, but maybe there isn't really in imminent danger, nothing's going to kill them there, then it's helping them devise little baby steps to face the fear. And when you actually do the opposite emotion, even just saying the emotion out loud makes fear go down.
Right.
Just identifying the emotion and then accepting the emotion, going opposite of the emotion, you can change it. But you can't change an emotion if, one, you don't want to, or two, you haven't accepted it.
So a good place to be able to get and the tools and the education for this would be like a DBT group or a DBT therapist, or can you have other, and we'll get Katie's information as well out on the website and on at the end of the show.
Anybody doing DBT will do emotion regulation, and I'd like to think that there are other therapies that teach emotion regulation, but I'm not thinking of any of them right now, but I'm sure they're out there. Emotionally focused therapy definitely works on identifying your emotions. I don't think they do as much in terms of helping you understand the purpose of your emotions, but EFT therapy does that. So there are ways to get those skills, but in this culture, we don't really acknowledge the importance of emotion and how to use it in a way that's effective.
Well, we were given emotions for a reason, just like we were given a circulatory system and a respiratory system or whatever. So emotions are there naturally and meant to help us get through this life.
Absolutely.
And if we know how to understand and read them and accept the fact that they're there and accept what they're teaching us and the signals, like, I stepped on a nail, I'm going to ignore that? No, I'm not. Or, somebody says, oh, just buck up. Well, here, break their knees and tell them to walk it off. I'm not, I don't mean that literally, but, it's the same thing.
Right.
The pain is there for a reason. The emotion is there for a reason. And learning how to understand them and read them and put them into practice instead of stuffing, we will get through the life and get to the life we want.
Yes, and actually when we're stuffing our emotions, and that is more likely to happen when there's an overabundance of emotion, especially in a power and control paradigm, because it's so much stimulus that people will just shut it down. And they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to sort it out. And so it becomes stuffed. But then that makes those people in that kind of an environment more susceptible to being controlled by outside forces, because then they're not in touch with their emotions and they can be moved by someone else's emotions.
Right. I that I totally understand. So if you wouldn't mind, let's kind of step toward the weight reduction, the weight loss, the wellness side of things. And we're talking about this emotion regulation and understanding, which is basically some of the prep work we would do for not just the wellness as a weight issue, but a wellness as in wholeness. Mm-hmm. Can we kind of speak to that preparation? Mm-hmm. And
really what I did for myself in this was, first of all, I became aware that there's not a lot of weight loss programs that really work, that are really effective. Right. Yes, Weight Watchers is lovely, but of course with almost every one of the weight loss programs that exists, the problem is that people gain the weight back.
Right.
And, the statistics on this are just kind of depressing, because truth be told, most cancers are more curable than obesity. by our current methods of treating them.
Okay.
Current weight loss programs are really ineffective. So that was my first education. And that helped me fight my shame. Like I could say to myself, okay, Katie, you're not such an idiot that you're overweight. Truth be told, most of the programs, and I've lost weight on, I've done all of them probably, OptiFast, Weight Watchers, Nutrisystems, all the different ones, and they work. But one of the problems with them is they don't tend to keep people thin. That years later, there is the propensity to gain the weight back and more. So I was really concerned with this process because I've lost hundreds of pounds before, and I didn't want to do that again.
Right.
I did not want to go through that process, and I thought there has got to be a way to take care of this problem that exists in human nature, that God, the universe, has given us, and what is that path? So I started out wanting to find that path based on my doing research about weight loss. So the first thing I realized was most of the stuff doesn't work long term. It works short term, it just won't necessarily, and I didn't want to do that. So then it was, okay, what is it that I would want in a weight loss program? I want to be able to eat the way I see other people who are thin eat. I do not want to end up obsessed about food, which is what I had become in other programs. Then I would obsess about the food, and I would think about what thin meal I was going to prepare and healthy meals, and I would panic about having all the right foods around, and I had good foods and bad foods, and I would get stuck in these cognitive distortions around food, and it was always on my brain. And then I got over focused on how much I was eating, and then I got over focused on exercise, and I went through being obsessed on all different aspects of weight loss. And I thought, I don't want to do that again either. I don't want this to be an obsessive process. What I want to do is try to reparent myself in a way and have a healthy relationship with food. So that was my goal.
Okay.
I don't care how fast I lose the weight, I told myself. I only care about developing a healthy relationship with food. Then that worked into, well then Katie, you're going to have to accept what you're doing with food right now that doesn't work. A lot of guilt and shame in that. It's been years of beating myself up for my relationship with food. I had triggers everywhere as I looked at myself eating food. And I started to see that I craved eating food mindlessly. I want to eat in front of the TV. I want to eat in front of the computer. I go to eat and I look for what am I going to distract myself with while I eat.
Yes.
Instead of having a relationship with food where I'm mindful of it and I'm paying attention to it. And I started to realize that I wanted to eat in the car. You can't really pay attention to your food when you're driving, but that's when I wanted to eat. And I started to become aware of the emotions underneath my eating. What am I feeling when I reach for this? What's happening inside my body? I started doing experiments where I would take a food like I would eat fast food. I don't eat it anymore. And I don't eat it anymore because I found that it doesn't really taste as good as I thought. Mm-hmm. So I'd take a burger from some favorite fast food place and I would sit down, no TV, no radio, nothing, just me and that burger. And I would pay attention to the way it tasted. I was sort of floored how maybe the first few bites you taste a lot of salt and sugar and all those additives. That
right.
And at first you think, well, that tastes good. But then like by the third or fourth bite, I'd realize this is not all that wonderful, this food. Mm-hmm. It's like this mixture of all these flavors, but I can't taste any of them, really. Mm-hmm. It isn't the same as eating carrots or fresh food. Right. I started to see a difference between that, and I realized it wasn't all that satisfying. And one time I did an experiment. I took a plate of potato chips and I did that. And I just mindfully ate the potato chips. And I thought I can have as many as I want. So I put this big pile on the plate thinking, well, I got just a little bit into the potato chips. And I realized, my gosh, these things are salty. There's no TV. There's nothing to look at while I crunch on these. This is not that fun to sit here and just eat chips. And little by little, I would just do whatever experiment was necessary for me to gather information about me and my relationship with food. And just focusing on not beating myself up, I tried to change the way I talked to myself. So if I heard myself say, Katie, that you're such a pig. Katie, you're learning about your relationship with food, and that's exactly what you need to be doing right now. So if I overate, I would just say, wow, I'm really full. That doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started talking to myself like a scientist would talk to themselves about, I pretended like I was Lewis and Clark of my own life, you know, like,
right.
Here's this river, and, you know, and I just tried to describe. I was using my DBT, mindfulness, observe, describe, and trying to participate. So I saw that there were times I ate when I was thirsty, and I started learning how to drink water. I saw that I ignored my hunger a lot of times and didn't pay attention to it, and then would be starving later in the day and then eat anything convenient and not purposefully. And just little by little, I amassed all this information about how I was interacting with food. And then I did this for about a couple years of just mindfully paying attention, but nothing was really changing until at some point I really had to ask myself, Katie, why are you killing yourself with food? Because I became aware that it was making me uncomfortable, that it was killing me, that it was hurting my health. And I thought, and there were a lot of tears in that. What is this about? Why don't you want to be connected to yourself? And that delved into some of my own personal issues, my trauma from my childhood and shame that went way back in time, which I had dealt with before in therapy. But this time it really hit me in a way I realized I'm still trying to kill myself and I need to stop. And that was really the shift for me, is when I realized how much I was hurting myself by feeling the sadness, by feeling the fear, by recognizing my guilt and shame and saying, I don't deserve that. Why would I treat myself this way? I would never treat any other human being this way. Why would I do that to myself? And then also the recognition that how can I be the best therapist I can be if I can't be good to myself?
Very good.
And so it was making those awarenesses, you know, that helped me get to the place where I started to change the way I ate.
So, wow, I mean, your story's powerful. It's inspiring, and thank you for the courage of sharing that with us. And we talked a little bit about how it took time. Your journey's been going on, what do you say, a year, 2 years, something
Probably
like that?
3.5 years total now.
Okay.
The first 2 was all just mindfulness and paying attention to how I ate, changing nothing. And
Except
then the last year and a half, changing the way I talk to myself, changing, yes.
Yeah.
I was changing.
So that was a preparation. So
Yes.
it wasn't like you just jumped in and said, okay, I'm going to do this. Like you said, you had an epiphany going, you know, I am literally killing myself. It may be a slow suicide, but that's exactly what I'm doing. I am beating myself up with food. And I understand that, because you get to the point where sometimes you're so full, you're hurting so bad, but you still want more. And how many people would want to be punched that many times?
Yes.
But that's what we're doing. We're basically giving ourselves some sucker punches and hurting ourselves. And for me, I sometimes understand it. It's as, I'd rather do this to me than let somebody else do it to me. But why let anybody do it to me?
Exactly. And I realized for me it was all about being unconscious. It's an old habit of dissociating from my body. I didn't want to be in here.
Right.
I was used to floating out there to handle my stress. So it was making peace and deciding I want to be in my body and I want to be awake. And in order to be awake, I would have to change the way I was interacting with food. And as I did, I started to taste the carrots and I started to taste the food that was good and enjoy it. And I started wanting to eat in a way that didn't cause guilt, like that I wouldn't feel guilty. And little by little, I would go through a day and look at my day and what I ate and say, I feel no guilt today. There's no food guilt today. I ate healthy. I enjoyed my food. It was amazing. I had 2 bites of that piece of cake. I didn't eat the whole piece of cake, and that 2 fights was amazing. And I started to enjoy food. Like you would think if you're fat, you enjoy food. But I didn't enjoy food.
I understand.
It was so covered in guilt all the time. And it was so dissociative. Now, I love food. Like, I love food. I can look forward to going out to eat. I still have weight to lose, but I'm always running in deficit of calories now, and it feels fine to do that as long as I'm eating lots of healthy things. And I just keep rolling in that way and going for the day where I'm not feeling guilt and shame. And if I do have a guilt where I eat more on a birthday or something, I quickly, okay, it's your birthday, you know? And I don't like to overeat anymore. So even on my birthday, if I have a little bit of dessert, more sugar than I normally would, I say, it's your birthday. If you do that once a year, you'll be fine.
Anything in moderation.
Anything in moderation. So there's no foods off the table. There's no how-tos. It's really intuitive eating. It's just being in the moment with food and my body. And it's just, I've never lived like this in my entire life. So it's like, and it's so hard to explain to people. People ask me, what are you doing? And everyone wants to put it into that box of dieting or not. So you're not eating what? No, I eat everything. And they'll tell me, well, you stay away from blah, blah, blah. No, I don't. I eat whatever I want.
And that's the perfect part of this. It's not being directed. It's internally driven. And it's all about driven. So we're going to check back with Katie in a couple weeks, and she's agreed to be on and help us with our wellness, not just for the diet part, but just on the wellness journey for this year. And we will be back. Talk to you soon. Have a great day. Thank you for watching Positive Momentum TV.